He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Hi and welcome to Eating Fried Chicken in the Shower bonus episode, which means I'm joined again by clinical psychologist Sarb Johal.
Kia ora, James. Hello.
Kia ora, brother. Look, I want to talk about something quite personal today. I want to talk about suicide and about the effects on those around you. I'm a survivor myself, and I often wonder about the effects, if I had been successful, what that would have done to the community around me. Can you speak about perhaps the mental health trauma that goes around?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start off with, if you are worried about someone and their risk of suicide, then one of the things that you shouldn't be afraid to do is to ask them. Because actually by asking and by listening to the answer, you could actually help to save their life. There doesn't seem to be evidence that this is kind of putting the idea in people's heads, but your response to what it is that they might tell you then might go a long way to perhaps changing that situation for them. So that's the first thing I would say. But I think you're absolutely right. For people who have had suicide of loved ones, of people that they know in their lives, then the ripples that go through that community of people who knew them, of people who perhaps are living with that loss in the future also continues to ripple. And I think that one of the things that you should not do is to think that you are being selfish for asking for assistance with coping with that, because I think that it's a very valid thing to do. It's a deeply affecting loss in people's lives and can, like I say, ripple through those networks considerably. So I think you should always reach out and ask for help in that situation.
What can we do when someone does take their life in our circles, in our community? What can we do to be kinder to ourselves?
Yeah, I think when we're listening to each other, perhaps speaking about that, whether we're talking about after the event of the suicide or perhaps we're talking with the person themselves, is that not rushing to a solution. Often that's what we want to do. When we listen to somebody, we're often thinking about, well, what does this mean for me and what do I need to do in order to make this situation better? Whereas actually what we perhaps can do that's most helpful at that time is to listen deeply as to what is happening for that person, and not just to the surface of the words, but actually listening between the lines as to what this person is actually trying to say to you, which may be quite different to what it looks like on the surface.
And when we can't do anything and there's other emotions there, like anger, what can we do with that?
I think you're right. I think there can be anger, there can be guilt.
Yeah.
There could be a feeling of shame that perhaps we didn't do what we feel like we could have done in that situation, and replaying that in our minds all the time. And I think it is really, really important that if we are experiencing that we recognize it as scary, we recognize it as stressful, and that it can be taxing as well. And I think that we do have systems that are available in New Zealand that we understand that living through somebody else's suicide completion is a very difficult situation for people to go through. It's not just the person, it's the whole community, it's the whole family system that's affected by it. And maybe not just for the moment, but also going into the future. So I think it's good to prepare yourself to understand that actually this may ripple forwards in your life and may come up at times where you think actually you weren't affected by it or you're over it, and it can come up again for you in unexpected ways. So I think preparing yourself for that and having that knowledge in mind helps a little, but then also making sure that you have a good support network, and part of that might be people that you already know, and part of that might be professionals who perhaps don't know your situation but are skilled at dealing with this situation in general, and getting to know your situation may be able to assist you in dealing with those feelings of anger or regret.
I was going to actually ask about that because, often we talk about, hey, have a support system, have a community around you, but sometimes I think in these situations, especially with grief, and maybe it speaks to just that kind of man alone idea that we have as New Zealanders. People internalize and they will try and deal with this by themselves. Is there something that they can do perhaps to start that journey to building a community around them?
Yeah, and it may be that the first thing that people do is just recognise and understanding what's going on for them, and their need might be to be alone and process for a little while. But often it's good to be able to recognise even in yourself and starting to write these things down perhaps and get a bit of an external view and seeing how this is tracking over time for you. So one of the first things that you can do is to perhaps journal a little bit and write these things down, and then perhaps over you look back over the week or over the month and you see actually what's the pattern there. Is there certain thoughts that keep coming up or certain emotions that keep coming up for you? And then you can start perhaps reflecting upon those emotions and those thoughts with other people in your support network too. And then if they seem to be a common experience, then that may be something that can be talked about further, or it may be something that's unique to you, and that's okay too. But the only way that we can come to terms with something like this, as much as we're able to, is to start to make sense of our experience, and this is one way of getting a handle on that.
And is that the fundamental difference? It's not necessarily trying to make sense of the person who's taken their life's experience, but actually focus on making sense of our experience of the trauma.
We may be faced with the uncomfortable fact that we'll never fully understand why it is the person did what it is that they did and completed their suicide. The only thing that we have control over is the understanding that we have of the impact of that event in our own lives. And even that is a difficult journey for people to make sense of. But really, understanding the impact is really the key for us to be able to move forwards in our own lives, rather than focusing upon what it is that the person did or why it is that they may have done it, because there may be incomplete answers there that are just not solvable.
We'll leave on that wisdom. Thanks very much, Clinical Psychologist Sarb Johal.